Story number one, whataboutism? Yeah, damn right it's about whataboutism. The world breathlessly covers the 37 counts on Donald Trump while ignoring the 17 tapes on Joe Biden. Yesterday, Donald Trump entered a not guilty plea in a court in Miami, Florida, on 37 counts of willfully mishandling classified documents, obstructing justice, defying federal authorities on attempts to recover classified documents. It was a scene in Miami. Crowd showed up in support of Donald Trump. Afterwards, he went to a cafe, bought lunch, bought food for everybody in the cafe. Network after network, breathless coverage of the case against Donald Trump. You know, I heard several commentators, even Fox News' own Juan Williams, push back on any conversation about the Bidens or the Clintons with that's nothing but whataboutism. Whataboutism is the idea that you have engaged in a deflection. You're not addressing the merits of the case. You're attempting to say, oh yeah, well, he did it too. And from a moral premise, from a premise of right and wrong, from a personal judgment or condemnation perspective, whataboutism doesn't work. It's not very persuasive. If you walk in and your child has his hands in the proverbial cookie jar, it doesn't do much for him to say, my brother took a cookie as well. You could be guilty, but so is he. That doesn't make you innocent. Two wrongs do not make a right. It simply makes you both guilty. As we've laid out in the last episode of the Will Cain Podcast, it looks like Donald Trump did have his hands in the cookie jar. And we haven't yet heard his defense, but if the evidence laid out in the indictment is compelling and true, more importantly true, that there are audio tapes of Donald Trump saying, this is not declassified, I never declassified this, it's secret, take a look, then Donald Trump's hand has been caught in the cookie jar, and he could very well be looking at a guilty verdict on at least some of these 37 counts. But that does not mean we should ignore whataboutism. In fact, whataboutism is actually more important than the evidence in the case. In this case, whataboutism is the most important issue when you catch someone with their hands in the cookie jar. Why? Because we're talking about the legal process, and the legal process is predicated on precedent. How do we handle these issues in the past? Court cases rely on the way that court cases were decided in the past. Application of the law is predicated upon how we applied the law in the past. And precedent, a legal term for whataboutism, as we walked through in the last episode of the Will Cain Podcast, takes you down the path that if Donald Trump's hand was caught in the cookie jar, so what? We don't prosecute, we don't pursue, we certainly don't vigorously press charges against people taking a cookie. In the worst of incidences, General David Petraeus or former NSA advisor Sandy Berger were found guilty willfully of absconding with and sharing classified documents. They received 2 years probation, community service, restitution. In other cases, the evidence of classified documents being handled misappropriately and not voluntarily turned over, as it's like to be described. When it comes to former Vice President Mike Pence or sitting president, then Vice President Joe Biden, there's not even an investigation into the case. Well, who cares? Enjoy the cookie. We didn't even pursue an investigation, much less an indictment, much less an arrest, much less a charge against Pence or Biden. And if, for some reason, Donald Trump has become a big asterisk, a caveat, a big bad boogeyman in our collective or your personal mind, and you can't possibly see the correlation between these cases. Oh, Pence gave them up the minute they were asked for, despite the fact that he never gave them up before they were asked for. Trump obstructed justice. If that's too dissimilar, then right on the nose is former Secretary of State and Senator of New York, Hillary Clinton, who had 193 more documents than Donald Trump, marked secret or classified on a private email server, the digital version of a box at Mar-a-Lago, and did not turn them over when requested, but instead, more egregious than Donald Trump, destroyed the documents with BleachBit software. Gone. Poof. Just like the investigation, just like the potential charges, and just like any potential indictment into Hillary Clinton. Gone. Poof. Precedent. Whataboutism tells us this case isn't about the problem of cookies being missing from the cooking jar, but the fact that one person who we truly hope we can finally get was caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It's not the way we do things in the United States of America. We do not have a two-tier justice system. We do not politicize our Justice Department. And why? Because we revert to the mean. We become like everybody else. We become a tribalistic society with nothing but brute struggles for power. But the whataboutism is more important than even the issue of classified documents, because last week, while the world began to turn its focus, its attention to the imminent indictment of Donald Trump, a, quote, highly credible source of the FBI was revealed inside of an FBI 1023 document to have told the FBI that he has direct evidence and knowledge of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden each receiving $5 million from the Ukrainian energy company Burisma in exchange for influence, in exchange for the manipulation of United States foreign policy. Now, as background, Burisma is the corrupt Ukrainian energy company. Are there any other kinds of Ukrainian energy companies? Who employed Hunter Biden on its board of directors at a rate of $83,000 a month. Now, as a reminder, Hunter Biden did not speak Ukrainian. Now, as a reminder, Hunter Biden had zero experience in the oil and gas industry. Now, just as a reminder, Hunter Biden was a crackhead. And those adjectives, attributes, and personal history seem to have qualified him for the board of directors at Burisma at a rate of $83,000 a month. Or, just spitballing and brainstorming here, was it his last name? Biden. Now that actually doesn't do the story justice, because that would suggest maybe Hunter Biden is simply doing what every young, wealthy man in the air business has done time immemorial throughout history. Nepotism, trade on his name. But that's not simply what was done by Hunter Biden. Simply trade on the name Biden. Instead, what is alleged is that the payments of $5 million were not just made to Hunter Biden, but also to Joe Biden. Like the allegations of deals with China, this money went through multiple bank accounts. In the case of China, to Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, Joe Biden's grandchildren. Money dispersed in so many different bank accounts, it's almost impossible to keep track. In this case, it's alleged that money went to both Joe Biden and Hunter Biden to affect American foreign policy. And now we know how and why. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, no hair on fire, Freedom Caucus, absolute bomb-throwing partisan, Chuck Grassley, who is as old as the Senate, has said that a foreign national has made it aware to the oversight committees that there is 17 tapes that have been recorded between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and a foreign national with direct knowledge of Burisma that indicate bribery, a scheme for bribery. The Washington Examiner is reporting that the person who made these tapes is Burisma owner Mykola Zlachevsky. Zlachevsky apparently made these tapes, 15 with Hunter Biden, 2 with Joe Biden, as a, quote, insurance policy. Zlachevsky have said that it will be difficult. It could take up to 10 years to unravel the bribe because the money went through so many different bank accounts. Now, why did Burisma pay Hunter Biden not just $83,000 a month, but $5 million to Hunter and $5 million to Joe Biden? Because as I mentioned at the top, Burisma was a corrupt energy company in Ukraine who kept winning oil and gas leases, kept winning deals in Ukraine. Now, there was a prosecutor who's alleged to have his own issues with corruption in Ukraine, the prosecutor general. His name was Viktor Shokin. And Viktor Shokin was the subject of pressure by then Vice President Joe Biden on Vladimir Zelensky to stop the investigation into Burisma. So the board of the company where Hunter Biden sits is under investigation for corruption. That board member's father, the Vice President of the United States, in charge of foreign policy in that part of the world, in charge of Ukraine, calls up the president, it's alleged, of Ukraine, and attempts to get the prosecutor in charge of investigating corrupt Ukrainian energy firm where Sun sits off the hook in the investigation, do away with the prosecutor. That sounds like influence peddling. That sounds like pay for play. That sounds like corruption. That sounds like one hell of a case of whataboutism. If Donald Trump is guilty of mishandling classified documents, of willfully not turning them over to the federal authorities, of obstructing justice, fine. But tell me, in what world can you reconcile that charge, however major or minor you pass judgment on that sin, with the choice by the federal government not to pursue very similar charges against Hillary Clinton, and the lack of breathless news coverage or the complete absence of an FBI or DOJ investigation into my editorialization, my subjective opinion, a much more consequential case of corruption, a much more consequential charge against the sitting president of the United States for having in the past peddled influence. Why is that so important? Because it would suggest the current sitting president is capable of being manipulated. And if that is revealed, then we ask ourselves, is he always looking out for the American national interest? Or is he under the direct influence, either by profit or by pressure, of foreign entities who now control American foreign policy? It might be worth asking when we have, Chinese spy balloons flying over the United States with a fairly tepid response from the United States of America, or the double and triple down of American arms and money flowing to Ukraine. Are we making these decisions in pursuit of the national interest of the United States of America and her citizens, or because the sitting president of the United States has been subjected to, in the past or the present, influence, improper, undue, corrupt influence? To me, that's not, my brother took a cookie as well. That's, okay, you caught me. My hand was in the cookie jar. I didn't want to turn over some classified documents. But did you know my brother is starting an arson fire in the back of the house? It's already caught the game room, and it's about to spread into the kitchen. You might want to check that out. No, let us make sure we first handle you in the case of the missing cookie. That's one hell of a case of whataboutism. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.